Welcome back to the MetaStellar channel. I'm Fallon Clark, book coach, editor, and writer, and I'm here to bring you the writing advice of the week. The craft is in drafts. Have you ever heard the first draft is for you and the next drafts are for your readers? For many writers, storytelling is iterative, the art of which is revealed over revisions and drafts. When you write your first draft, you're telling yourself the story as you need to hear it to make the best sense of it. That first draft is typically when you learn about your main character's goals and motivations, the barriers or villains that hinder their success, and what the ultimate stakes are if they don't succeed. You'll also meet the rest of the cast and get to know them, understand them, see them moving about your story world. And your first draft will be full of the details you needed to include to get from beginning to end. But when you tell your story to your reader, you begin to uncover what your reader needs. Drafting reveals the true shape of your story. As you mold your manuscript, refine your scenes and characters, kill your darlings, polish your prose, you confirm your reader gets enough, but not too much. And it's easy to get ahead of yourself, to start editing before there's really anything there to edit. So how do you approach drafts as you refine your craft? Know when to edit. Kicking off this week's writing advice is a handy post about knowing when to edit. And this is an important bit of information. When to Edit and How by Joyce Adi Zarins for Writer's Rumpus provides a high-level overview of self-editing, including when to call in your beta readers and when to get serious about grammar and style. Zarins also recommends Strunk and White as a style resource, a book I've recommended too. Some of the commonly confused words in Strunk and White appear in the commonly confused words list I added to my custom exclusions dictionary for copy editing. But before you go too deep into word choice analysis and syntax construction, it's important to see how your story develops from the first page to the last. Determine your story driver. Each story contains a main question thread that moves the story forward. Simplified, they are the milieu, what is this place and what can I learn about it? The idea, what was that or who did that? The character, who am I and what do I need? An event, what is happening and can I stop or fix it? These four basic story drivers are known as the mice quotient, which comes straight out of writing fantasy and science fiction, How to Create Out of This World novels and short stories by Orson Scott Card, Philip Athens, Jay Lake, and the editors of Writer's Digest. While it's important to know at a high level the differences between these drivers, the lines between them in stories are far more blurred than you may prefer. The most commonly used story drivers are character and event or plot. And if you don't already have a clear understanding of the differences between these two types of drivers, head over to Mythcreants for What is the Difference Between a Character-Driven and Plot-Driven Story by Chris Winkle. Be aware that Winkle, like me, sees character and plot as two codependent sides of the same bookish coin. But also be aware that it's not uncommon for stories to use several drivers to ask a few questions. However, one driver must stand out as the main thread so that the ending of your story satisfies the promise you made to your readers at the beginning. When elbows deep in that self-edit, look for your main story driver by examining the question or questions you pose to your reader directly or indirectly. Then, as you read back through your manuscript, make sure you answer those questions or provide a reason why the questions cannot be answered yet, so your reader isn't left with an unfinished taste in their mouth. Smooth your perspective and distance. When you're done examining your story drivers and asking and answering those main thread questions, it's time to analyze your narrative perspective and distance for consistency and hone your character's voice for reader immersion. This week, I had the pleasure of writing a piece for Writer's Fun Zone titled At, Through, or To, Point of View and Narrative Distance in Fiction. And though it may sound a bit like tooting my own horn, I am told it was a great article for those who struggle with point of view and those who struggle to see the creative control you may wield by choosing a specific point of view for a specific reason. And if you've gotten stuck haggling over whether the story is best told through first or third person, for example, check out the article to see the merits and functions of both POVs to make sure you've made the right choice for your story and its readers. When you're certain of your chosen POV, it's time to go deep into that POV character's head. 5 Tips to Create a Deep Character Voice by Hope Ann for a writer's path moves through character voice creation using the character's immutables and experiences to do it. You'll need a solid understanding of your character's relevant backstory, occupations, emotional landscape, and their growth arc, so readers can see how their personality and goals help them achieve their desired outcome or not. So move through the exercises and collect whatever information you need about your character to best understand why they think the way they think and speak the way they speak. Sprinkle in the magical mood dust. Now, answering promised questions and turning your 2D characters into real people is great, but readers crave conflict and tension to keep turning pages. And the most successful writers are often those who have learned to wield tension and conflict like the mighty literary swords they truly are. To understand what conflict, tension, and suspense mean, as well as how the trifecta work together during storytelling, check out Beguile Your Readers with Tension, Suspense, and Conflict by Lynette M. Burrows for Writers in the Storm. Burrows provides examples from popular stories like The Little Mermaid, the Disney version, to show you how these elements come together to frame the story and keep things on track. But even horror stories and psychological thrillers benefit from a bit of levity. When you need a joke to land well to elicit the chuckle that stops your reader from slamming the book closed in grief or abject terror, check out What Makes It Funny by Gabrielle Vallion for career authors. Vallion makes the case that serious writers know how and when to be funny to create a pleasurable experience for readers. You know, like Bradley Whitford being eaten by a merman in Cabin in the Woods, or basically all of Welcome to Night Vale. Then pull it all together. And when you reach the ending of your manuscript, it's probably a good idea to take a break to avoid feeling creatively drained. But after that break, look again at your ending to make sure it answers the main question you posed at the beginning of your story. And while you're looking, listen to the podcast episode, The Game, Why Endings Are Important by Valerie Francis and Melanie Hill for Story Nerd. Francis and Hill dissect the movie The Game of 1997 to figure out whether or why it worked or didn't. And the pair of podcasters differentiates between left brain hooks, intellectual hooks, and right brain hooks, emotional hooks, when examining a story's appeal. While I won't malign the passive protagonist here because I do think passivity can be powerful when used well, and while you may or may not agree with all the points made about this movie, especially if it's a movie you like, the podcast episode explains how you can learn about good storytelling techniques by acknowledging the not so good stories. Inconsistencies in characterization, lackluster plot events, improbable circumstances, and figuring out why they don't work. By the time you work through these resources, your manuscript will be of a higher quality than it was when you started. And since the art of the craft comes while you draft, rinse and repeat these steps as needed. If you've ever looked at the collection of advice links we collect each week, you know there's more than I could possibly include in a single advice video. So always check the links at the bottom of the text post to find what you need. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this week's curated advice. What resonated with you? What questions do you have? And what was missing? Leave a comment below and let me know how we can help you meet your writing goals. Happy writing!